Hi everyone. So today we're going to be drawing with colour pencils, which I haven't been doing for that long. So I still think of myself as a beginner, but I really enjoy it. And I'm learning as I go. So I'll share with you what I've learned so far. So before we start drawing, I wanted to just show you what I use. So I use these, I've got these Holbein pencils. Oh, that's very shiny, isn't it, on the page? I'll move it. They're really nice. They're really pigmented. They're quite expensive, but I think, yeah, if you can afford them, they're worth it. So I have a set of regular colors, and then I have this set, which is a huge set of pastel colors, which are really, really lovely. And I came across those. I took a class as a student on drawing color pencils, and the teacher used those and recommended them, and I'm really, really happy with them. If you can't afford Holbeins, they're quite similar to Polychromos or Prismacolors. So they're quite richly pigmented. Yeah, so I like them a lot. I know in other classes we've talked about blenders, so I've hunted out all the blenders I've got. So this is a pen one, which is made by Derwent. There's a fat and a thin nib. So I think it's alcohol in there. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's my favorite blender, the pen. You can also use these paper blenders, but they get very dirty, and I find it really hard to get to sharpen them. Though I know you're supposed to be able to. I always struggle with it. And then there's this pencil one, which is made by Caran d'Ache, the Swiss company, which again, you just rub and it blends the colors. So that one's quite nice, but I like the pens best. And then I have various kinds of erasers. So, oh, sorry, making a noise. So I have this one, which is a little Tombow pen, and it comes with several refills. So that's good for erasing really small areas. And there's also this one, which is similar, which obviously you can sharpen to a point, made by Pasler, and it's an eraser pen. And obviously there's a brush for brushing away your erasing. There's my usual Faber-Castell pen, which I find erases colour pencil well. But also I've got a putty rubber. And until I started drawing with colour pencils, I couldn't really figure out what putty rubbers were good for, but actually they're really good with colour pencils. Because if you use paper that has a little bit of tooth, which my paper has, slightly toothy, and you use the putty rubber on it, it will just lift. So you can use it to lift highlights. If I can get it out, I can show you. So here where I've got this, it might not do it because it's so long since I did it. Oh no, it has. Yeah. So the red is already going lighter, and you can see it on the eraser there. So that's color it's lifted off. So, and because the paper's slightly toothy, it lifts it from the surface of the paper. So the color that's further down will stay on, but just the color on the surface will come off. So really good for highlights. I really like the pencil for that. And then this paper, this is just a Seawhites journal. I know it's not portrait. You'd think that I should be drawing portraits in portrait view, but when I started using color pencils, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep at it. And this was the sketchbook that I had. We have a Seawhites outlet very near where I live. Their factory is quite close by, so I would go there and always come home with lots of sketchbooks because they're so cheap. So I happened to have this one, so I decided I was just going to use it even if it didn't make sense. So I just turn it this way to use it. So, and the one other thing I have is this is a Prismacolor, but it's a Col-Erase pencil. So it's very erasable. You can get whole sets of them. So I bought this as a pack of 12, but it might even be more than 12. I bought it as yeah, that's more than 12, isn't it? I bought it as part of a pack anyway. But I only really used a couple of the colors because I use these for doing the line drawing, so that it kind of disappears into what you do on top of it. So you can buy these individually, and I really recommend you can buy them online just one at a time. So you can find them on Amazon. Not that I'm promoting Amazon over any other seller, but you can buy them singly on Amazon. And I use the indigo or the red. I occasionally use the red one as well. But I don't really use them for anything else, just for my line drawings. because if I do make a big error, then I can erase it, start again. And they're really helpful for doing that. So I do recommend trying to get a hold of at least one, just one. That's everything, I think. I have a jelly roll for highlights, but that's everything that I use. So I also thought I would start with, so every class, I talk about marking up the photograph and how you can mark it up to understand the proportions of the face. So I did this one on my iPad before we started and printed it out, just really to show you what I mean. So that was the line I drew to go straight down the middle of her face. I chose this photograph particularly because she's looking straight forward and she has a pretty symmetrical face. So we have a line going down, and then I drew in an eye line. And then I've just marked the spaces. So this is her eyes, and then this is the edge of the face. Because then when you're drawing, you can see these and you can understand kind of the proportions that you're trying to get. And when we look here, usually people say that the space between the eyes is about an eye wide. In her case, it isn't. It's quite a bit narrower. So drawing these lines help you to understand. So I draw a line for the bottom of the nose and I draw a line for the bottom of the chin. I don't always do this physically. It's what I'm doing mentally when I'm trying to figure out how to draw a face. The blue lines are what I always call the plumb lines, which I stole from Ros Stendhal. Thank you, Ros. It's kind of how you line up the edges of the mouth. So the edges of the mouth usually line up with this side of the iris. And in this case, it lines up perfectly. And the same here. It lines up perfectly with the edge of her iris. The lines I've drawn here are for where the neck sits underneath her face. And they line up, that lines up very much with the end of her eyes. And then we have lines here for the ears. So the ears usually sit between the middle of the eye and somewhere around the mouth. This photo is obviously not quite straight on because this line is above the mouth and this one is kind of in line with the nose. So, but again, drawing those things will help you, drawing these lines on a photo will help you understand the proportions of a face. So I think it's well worth doing. And this line here, if you look at this distance and this distance, they're pretty much the same. So the eyes are pretty much halfway down her head. So, you know, we often make the mistake of drawing the eyes somewhere up here, but they're not. They're actually halfway down that head. So if we try and do that, so I have another photo here on my iPad, so I'm not just looking at the lines, I can actually see her features. So I'm just going to get a page up that I can draw on. There we are. And set this. I might have to use a clip to just clip. I didn't think about that beforehand. I'm not sure I can find one, so maybe not. I was going to try and just clip that page out of the way, but we'll manage. So I'm going to start with a line kind of across the page and straight down the middle. And that will tell me where her features are going to sit. So I'm going to start with her eye. Always start with this eye here. And it's a really nice, so this is my indigo Col-Erase pencil that I'm using here. Always struggle to get the iris round, but I think that looks okay. So then we know that her other eye isn't quite an eye's width apart. We know from the drawing. In fact, maybe I'll put this drawing here so that you can see it. And I'll use the drawing, the photo that I've got there. So we know her eyes aren't quite an eye apart. Oh. Yeah, I mean, if it helps you to draw in these lines on your page, then definitely do. Because they won't show by the time you've added lots of layers of pencil on top. So now I'm looking at her eyelids. This is such a great photo she's taken because it's really designed to help people draw her. So just looking at what we have underneath her eye. And a bit like when we were drawing with ballpoint pencil, you can add in a lot of detail here if it will help you to draw, because you probably won't see it at the end because you'll have lots of layers of colour pencil on top. So there aren't any really strong shadows in this image, but if there were strong shadows, I'd be perfectly happy to draw them in, knowing that they're probably not going to show. So if we look at the image here, where her eyebrow sits is slightly inside the edge of the eye. So there, I think that's about right. So it's just inside the eye. I often draw eyebrows and then I look at this space here to try and figure out if I've got them right or if I've got them too close together or too far apart. So know her nose is around here. Making her nose a bit bigger than it is. Again, you can line up the nose as well. If you're drawing those lines, you can draw lines to figure out pretty much where the bottom of her nose sits. I think I've got that about right. Drawing nostrils always feels like such a strange thing to do. So I know that the mouth lines up with the inside of her iris, so that's a bit too wide there. So you can just draw your pencil down the page without actually touching the page, and you'll get it to the right place, and then you know where it should go. I've made the bottom of her mouth a little bit narrow, so I'm just going to widen it out a bit. And we have this little crease on her chin. And then we can use these lines again to guide us in drawing the edges of her face. Because we know what the kind of distance is because we've marked it up. It's about half an eye. Slightly wider on this side. The chin is always is never the size I expect it to be. I used to make them very big, and so people would look at my drawings and they'd have these enormous square chins. Now I often make them too small because I'm so afraid of making them too big. So that's her neck. And then we've got the ears. So the ears are in line with her eye. We know that. Well, this ear is anyway. The other one slightly isn't. And it comes to below her nose to around there. And if you're using either one of these pencils or a graphite pencil, this is all erasable while you're trying to figure out where things sit. So I'm going to come over to this side. I think I'm going to, although this ear isn't parallel to that one, I'm going to make it so that they look even. So, I mean, that's the other thing to remember when you're drawing a portrait. It's not low enough, is it? No, that's more like it. It's your portrait. You can draw it however you want. So if you want to change features, especially if you want to change things like the colors of features, it's so easy to do that. Yeah, really easy to change the colors. So hair, eyes, it's your portrait. It might be a photo of someone else, but what you do with it is entirely up to you. So she has some hair here. Big cut there. Right, I'm just going to rummage around for a moment. That'll do. I was just looking for something. I have one of these bands that will hold my pages out of the way, and that's done it. Perfect. I don't have to hold them now. So I'm just going to add some lines for her hair. So it's very much the same thing that I do kind of regardless of the medium. I'm using, just so I understand how her hair sits as I'm drawing it. All the flyaways and everything like that we can add later. So yeah, that looks good. So once I've got to this point, I think the first thing I'm going to do is just make some of these features, because I'm quite happy with where they sit and how they look. I'm going to make them a little bit darker, because once I start adding pencil on top of this, they're going to disappear. So, and you'll see I do this quite a lot of times in the drawing process. I have to come back and re-emphasize the features that I want to be seen, or that I want people to look at the most, I guess. So once I've got to that point, I can put my Col-Erase pencil away. I don't need it anymore. And I'll usually do exactly what I do when I'm drawing with ballpoint pens or with Copic markers. So I'm going to go in and just add indigo pencil. Just this one says Prussian blue. It's not actually indigo, but a dark blue pencil anyway, to the shadows. So and not just the shadows, but everywhere that is dark, so that once I start drawing, once I start adding color more widely, I already know what areas are going to be dark. So I'm going to start with her eyes. I've practiced various different kinds of coloring with color pencils. I tend to use this kind of hatching stroke. So I'm not really hatching, but I'm just going up and down, and I kind of think of it as a sort of hatching stroke, because it's a lot like hatching. I find if I hold my pencil right on the end and use it so it's almost horizontal, then you can cover a lot more area, because you're using the whole side of the nib to shade. But I generally only do that on quite big areas. Once I get to smaller areas, I'll hold the pencil more like that. But I think of it a bit, if you've watched my Copic marker classes, where I start off usually with a chisel tip, quite a fat tip, because I don't want to be really fussy. That's kind of, it's the same here. If I start shading in like that, it just encourages me to be really fussy and just to do a tiny area at a time. And I don't really want to do that. I want to be a bit more expressive. So I'm just going to draw that line in again, because as soon as I shade there with blue, that line disappears. So I'm going to have a little bit in her mouth, not too much. So you can see I'm really not trying to keep within any lines. I'm just adding color where I know it's going to be darker towards the end of this process. I'm going to have to move my pencils because they're butting against my hand. So I'll move them to the other side. So I'm struggling to draw over here. You need quite a lot of space if you're going to hold your pencil like this. So, and there's a little bit of dark down here on her neck. And don't worry if your lines are really untidy, mine are. But I know I'm going to be adding so many layers of color. I will sometimes draw a line like this just to give myself an edge, so I know where I'm shading up to. It's a lot easier then to shade it if you have a line that's kind of telling you where you need it. I'm going to add this to the hair as well, because the hair is dark. So I'm just going to go around and make sure there's some blue on her face. I need to do her eyebrows. I've just realized that those are definitely not dark enough. They're one of the darkest parts of her face. And the inside of her ears. So that's kind of my map for where I've just noticed a shadow here. I was going to say that's my map for where I'm going to be adding color, but I've missed a few shadows. So, but that looks fine. So I think maybe I need a bit more here. So I'm looking again at the picture. I'm going to draw in. Every time you add a layer of color, these lines will get paler. So I tend to just keep drawing them in so I can see them clearly. Same with the ear. We've kind of lost her ear a little bit. But you can just keep adding, going back and going over the details. So now I'm going to, I think I might start with yellow, with a light yellow. So I've got a light yellow here, and I'm going to add this to all the places where the skin is quite pale. So up here, here, there, I can draw the lines on here. I have to look at my photo to see on her nose because it's obscured by all the lines I've drawn on it. But here, a little bit on this cheek too. My printer needs new ink, so this has come out very yellowy, which is why I've got a pink version on my iPad, a pinker version. But it's quite helpful in seeing where it really does need yellow, because where the yellow really stands out in this photo is where I'm going to be adding it. So, and if I'm using color pencils and adding color, I'll usually just draw the edge of the places where I want to add it, because it helps. So I'm going to come in and erase. Just going to erase the line down the middle there. Not completely, but I don't need it, and it's getting in the way a little bit, so I'm just going to remove it. An area here, and the same here. So a lot of the colored pencil artists who I've watched working split the face into zones. So they have the top of the face they call a yellow zone, because that's where there's most yellow. The middle of the face is a pink zone, because that's where you'll find most pink. And the bottom of the face is a blue zone, because that's where you'll find most of the shadow, really, and the darker blue. And I found that's pretty good advice. It doesn't mean that you only use those colors in those areas, but it kind of helps you in knowing what you're looking for in each of the areas. Well, I find it helps me anyway. So, and I do find that I'll usually have less yellow around the chin than anywhere else. And I think that drawing with color pencils it's very much a layering process, just like we did with with ballpoint pens last week. So you don't have to worry too much about doing too much of a color or too little of a color, because you can, if you do too much of a color, you can correct it with a different color, and if you do too little, you can just add more later. So I find it's quite liberating, just not having to worry about how it works. Apologies if you can hear my dog barking. It's got excited at something outside. So I'm going to put a little bit on her ears where the highlights are. That's probably enough yellow for now. So I'm going to switch to a pink. So this is just a medium pink. And I'm going to add that kind of over most of the face, actually. So I'm going to go a little bit into the areas where I've got yellow, where I think that there is also some pink. So this is just a first layer. We'll deepen the pinks later. But right now, I just want the beginning of that color. And I'd always encourage less rather than more, but not so little that you're afraid of kind of drawing on it. But if you go really heavy, it's really hard to correct it later. So you can build up colour over and over in layers very easily. She has a lovely pink nose. So and really pink cheeks too. So I'm going to go over a bit of the yellow, but not all of it. I have to go up right here just to get the colour in there. Around her nose here, I'm just going to add some lines to help me see, because I can see that I probably should have done more of a shadow there. So just to help me see what's going on. Come in here with pink. So there is pink, obviously, on her neck. So we'll add some pink on top of the yellow and blue. No, I'm not going to put any pink just here because I think it's quite yellow there. Ears. Oh, I haven't done this eye either. I was wondering why this eye was looking so strange, because it doesn't have any pink around it. And there's a lot of pink around the eye and also the ears. So you start I start very generally, just doing big swathes of colour. And then gradually I'll become more detailed as I get closer to what I want. Oh, and I haven't done her lips, which are obviously going to want some pink before they have anything else on them. So once I've got those colours down, I'm just going to add, so this is I actually call it brilliant yellow. It doesn't look like yellow. This is more of a peachy colour, which I would regard as a kind of flesh tone for white skin. So I'm just going to add some of this as well, especially where I've gone very yellow, because I just want to dampen down the yellow a little bit. But I'm probably going to use it just about everywhere. So you see here, we're already losing the lines that we drew for the side of the face. So, I mean, the good thing about that is if you make errors, you can easily correct them because the lines just disappear. So if you see at this point that you've got errors, you can just correct them. Just draw new lines. The lines that we drew initially go so easily and so quickly. So I'm just trying to even out the skin tone a little bit, really. I did want to leave a highlight on the nose, but I'm not sure I've done that. But we can go in and make a highlight with the putty rubber. So I'll get my putty rubber from here. So if you realise you have gone too dark anywhere, just get your rubber and just shape it so it's kind of the shape of the area where you want to remove colour. So I just want a little dot on her nose. So I'm just going to dab away. And already I have a white dot now on her nose. So if you see somewhere else where you want to, obviously this image doesn't have an awful lot of highlights on it, but if you've gone too dark, you can lift off the dark as well, like that. But I'm just going to draw in. So I now have this dot there, and I'm going to draw around it so that I don't go over it. So this is burnt umber. I'm just going to add a layer of colour to her hair. I'm not going to leave it this kind of brown colour. I'm going to add other darks to it as well, like we did with ballpoint pens. So I'm going to add some purple and other colours. But right now, I just want to get a sense of the light and dark. Once I'm at this point, so I'm just going to do her eyebrows and her eyes. Then I'm quite happy to just start going in and working it up some of the details. And we'll come and add more layers to the skin tone as we go. But right now, we're just going to add more and more detail. So I might come in with some more pink to start with. I might come in with a slightly darker pink. So this one's a bit darker. Trying to see what color they call it. Cosmos, which means nothing. But it is a darker pink. So I'm going to come in and add a bit more because I don't feel like the pinks are pink enough at the moment. And then we'll work on some of the features. So I'm just adding this where I think the skin is very pink. So around the eyes. I drew in a line to help me there, but I don't like the line. So I'm going to remove it a little bit. Just a little bit. I think I've removed more of the colour than the line, but not to worry. So I really like the dark pink under her eyes. So I'm going to come in a bit firmer and add that colour in. But if you start quite gently, you can see quite easily if you do it and you don't think it really works, you just don't have to do any more of it. If you think it works well, you can come and add more and more as we go. I want some pink in the shadow here. So I'm holding the pen a little bit more. The pen's a little bit more up right now, just because it gives me a bit more control. So I'm picking up her ears. And then we'll go and add some more shadows in a moment because I can see that we need them now. The blue's almost disappeared on her face. You can't really see it. So we'll go back and put more of it in. But you can create really nice tones just by building up colour slowly. And also using some colours that you wouldn't expect, which we'll do in a moment. It's lovely pink in her neck right here, so I'm just going to add a bit more pink there. Okay, I feel like the colours are getting a bit muddy together, so I'm going to bring some of them out again. So I'm going to just come in and redraw some of these lines. Now, I don't redraw all the lines. Quite like some parts of the face being quite well worked with line and other parts not. Kind of like what that does. So I just going to work the lines that I like and I think help you understand the face. So like in here, the nose. And that will disappear again as we work. I've just realized that I completely missed the shadow under the nose. So that's fine. We can draw it in now. I'm going to do that a little bit lighter. And make it darker if I want to later. So I'm going to add a little bit of shadow to the edges of the mouth. And then draw in the center of the mouth again. And make this darker. So I'm just trying to bring back the lines I had, which have, a lot of them have disappeared. And I'll do the same with her eyes. I always kind of like to use blue around the eyes, even if someone has brown eyes. So you can use blue on top of the brown and it'll make her eyes really nice and dark. But the eyelids I usually draw in with blue. I'm not going to add any eyelashes until the end. So I'm looking at where else we need dark. So we need some more dark in these eyebrows. So definitely still need more. I mean, I haven't drawn the ear very well on this side, but you can't see very much of it, which is probably part of the reason why. I'm just going to come in and darken up. In fact, her hair is over her ear there. But there is a shadow on the inside here. And I'm going to make this shadow under her mouth darker. And this one under her chin. It's lots of different lovely colours where it's catching the light differently. So I'm going to add some blue to the middle of it, but not to the edge. So it kind of comes down like this, and then this part is blue. And the rest of it, that and that part up there is much pinker. There is still a little bit of blue up here. But I just want to make sure that her chin looks separate from her neck. Okay. So I'm going to add a bit of purple to the hair. Again, I like using different colours. I mean, we're just creating a dark, so it doesn't have to be the colour that her hair is. And obviously, I'm not making it that colour. I'm just using a dark. But you see, as soon as I put the purple on, how much darker it gets. And then we'll go over it again, maybe with brown, to draw in the lines and the highlights. I also usually find it easier to colour the hair. And then if you want to take highlights out, to take them out with a putty rubber. So, but I'm not adding any real definition to the hair yet. I'm just adding colour, just to try and make it darker. It's the same. As soon as we add the purple, everything gets so much darker, which helps. I'm going to do the same in her eyes. And in fact, her eyes look very brown now because we've added blue and purple and brown and pink. So a range of colours. So now they look brown. So then I've gone back to my brown and I'm just going to try and create a bit of definition now in the hair. So I'm going to start with line drawing, but I might come back and add shading. I'm not sure yet. Just see how it looks when I've done this. I'm just kind of drawing the shapes. And I'm going to draw some of those curls and flyaways. That are so nice. Do the same on this side. And if you do this and you don't like the lines you've drawn, you can just go over them. Just go over it all in brown and those lines will, will mostly disappear. So I always feel like when I'm drawing with color pencil, I can experiment because anything that doesn't work, you can lose the lines. So I'm going to add some structure to her eyebrows now by putting just pencil strokes to represent lines. And I might add a little bit of shading to make her hair a little bit more brown. And it feels like she's starting to emerge now. That's what I like about this kind of layer upon layer drawing. Gradually the person emerges on the page, which I like so much. Because you can't really see them when you start, but as you progress, they become more and more obvious. So I'm just going to put the edges of her hair there. So now I'm coming into her eyes again with more brown. I mean, am I going to draw her pupils or not? I don't know. I very often don't bother if their eyes are really dark. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of black in the middle. But I often don't bother because you can't really see them. Maybe you can just see them in that photo, but her eyes are so dark anyway that they're not really visible. So at this point, this is going to seem scary and you don't have to do it if you don't want. But I'll often go over the whole drawing with a different light color. So I've got green here. I can show you some others where I've done it. Where it feels scary to go over it all with green, but it kind of adds something. So this one, I went over the whole thing with green. And, or you know, you don't have to use green. This one, I went over it all with orange. I think that was very close to the end that I did that. Again, this wasn't my idea. This was something I saw someone else do. And I really liked that one. I went over it with yellow and it hardly shows. So if you're not feeling brave, you could just use it. And that one I did yellow. So when I started doing it, I just used yellow. But now I've got braver and I use stronger colors. So I think I'm going to go over it all with green. Sometimes I do that first. I'll color the whole page first. But this time, I think I'm going to do it now. I'm not sure I like that green. Maybe I need something that's a bit greener. Yeah, maybe I use this one. So this is apple green. Yeah, I'd prefer that. Trying to remember the artist, Chris Hong on Instagram. He does this. And I watch all her reels. And she starts with these amazing bright colors. Or goes over the whole face with them. And often has, you know, doesn't use brown in the hair, but uses any dark. So I've been trying to learn to do the same. I'm not going to go over the eyes, and I'm not going to go over the little highlight that I've got on the end of the nose. I'm going to try not to, but everything else, in fact, I'm going to take it all the way out so that I've got all the flyaways in. But yeah, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, obviously. Just gives a little bit of life and pep to the drawing. Deb, let me just oh, I muted myself then. I was asking you to unmute yourself and I ended up muting myself. So doing the wrong thing.
I just put it in the chat.
Yeah.
How to spell Chris Hong?
It's Chris, Chris, and Hong is Hong. I can find them and I'll put their Instagram, a link to their Instagram in the drawingXpressions website later. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to be able to draw portraits the way she does with such amazing colors. Really, really good. And she shares lots of reels so you can see how she adds the color. So I've added green and her face doesn't look horrifically green. It looks fine. It's just added a little bit of something. So I'm going to add some more. I think I'm going to go back over and add some more peachy color now to the skin tone. Now I'm just doing a time check. Oh, we have plenty of time. That's good. the thing about the green is that her shoulders now merge into it, which wasn't intentional, but it works, and I quite like how it works. And they do a little bit on the photo we've got. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to work a little bit more on her eyes, because I think they're an important feature. So I've got this kind of, I don't know what color, burnt sienna, but this sort of reddy brown. And I'm just going to add. So once I'm doing the features, I use the pencil quite upright because it's much easier to be detailed and specific with it. So, and I'm just adding some brown just to the bottom half of her irises, because I want the top half to be darker. So just the bottom half, and I might then use some of this color in the hair. So just drawing lines, really. A little bit of kind of directional hatching to follow the lines of her hair. I often don't think you have to work up the hair very much. It can look a bit overworked if you do too much to it. Then I will add more flyaways in this colour too, since I've used this colour. I mean, I can carry on adding flyaway hairs for hours because it's something I really like to do, but I'm not going to. I'll restrain myself. So I think before I do the eyelashes and those other features, I'm going to do a little bit more on the face itself. So I'm looking for, maybe I'll use a little bit of red on her lips. So this is just a scarlet. It's just a regular red, quite an orangey red. Because we've already got pink. We can just use a little bit. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't use this one like this right now, because it's got a really sharp point, which means I've probably never used this color before, which is why it's so sharp. So really, if you're going to use them face down like that, you need the nibs to be rubbed down a little bit. But it's great for adding, for emphasizing like the center of her mouth there. So it's good for those kind of lines. And I'm also going to add that around the nostrils as well. So by the time I finish doing this, all my lines are made up of multiple colors. So it's not just like one color line, which I really like. It's made up of a whole range of colors. So I'm going to add a bit more dark to the lips. Obviously, you can move your page around to make it easier to color this way. I'm not moving mine so that you can see what I'm doing. If I wasn't doing this in class, I'd be moving my page around as well. So I quite like for the mouth, not doing the lines around the side, just kind of doing the center, little line at the bottom and little line there, so they don't come up too overworked. And I'm going to take away a little bit with my putty rubber, where I tried not to draw, but it's still quite hard to leave enough of us to get no pigment. So it's easier to just go over it. You can also see, looking at the picture here, that there's quite a lot of red on the underneath of her nose. So I'm going to add some there. I'm going to go over the eyelid lines. And I'm going to add some red, the center of the eyelid and a little bit underneath. But gently, because I don't want it to be too strong. I'm looking to see if I can get away with a bit more around her nose, and I can. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. You can also add a bit of red. It always looks nice in brown hair. So I'm kind of drawing lines, but I'm using the edge of edge of the pencil, so they're quite wide lines. So I still need to go back in and again recreate some of these shadows that have, like this one here around her eye. You can see it's really dark in the image, but it's almost disappeared in my drawing, so I'm going to bring it back. So just, I mean, this is just a hatching stroke, basically up and down. And I can see as I'm doing it, I can see that it will look really nice with some light blue in too. So in a minute, I'm going to add some light blue. The other thing you can do, so if you do this and you get lines that you don't like, you can either use the putty rubber to get rid of them, or you can come in with a blender. So we have all these different kind of blenders. The paper blender is pretty good at getting rid of lines. So as soon as I've done that, that line has pretty much disappeared. So I'll use the others in a moment so you can see how they work. I just struggle with paper blenders because I can never get them clean, and then I can't sharpen them very well. I don't really know how you're supposed to do that. Maybe I should Google it and have a look. I've never kind of been able to get them to work very well for me. But it is quite good if you want colours to blend in. Also, if you use a blender at some point, you can then usually add more colour on top. So if your paper isn't really taking more colour, if it feels like it's a bit saturated, if you use a blender on it, it will then become lesser. You'll be able to add more colour. So very often if I reach a point and I'm not sure if this colour is actually going on now, I'll just use a blender. Usually the pen. So I still think we need, actually that needs lilac as well. So the good thing at this point is if you're looking at your drawing, as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the drawing. And as I'm doing that, I can see other colours. So, which I probably wouldn't have used right at the beginning, but now I can see them. I've made a bit of a mess of it, but we won't worry. I like how it looks. I'm not sure if it looks like her. Maybe it does. Yeah, I was talking about using light blue. So around here, there's some really nice light blue colours there and in the shadow there. So I'm going to come in and add that to those. Of course, you can use colours that you can't see, but it's always good when you see colours and think, oh, I can add that colour. I hadn't thought of doing that. And you suddenly see it in your image. It's so nice then because you've basically got a guide of what colour to add and where. So I'm looking to see where else. It's mostly in the shadow down this side. And down here in this big shadow. See her neck going around there. And there's a little bit of blue here too. Which is looking really green because I've got a lot of yellow under it. But I think that's really nice. So I want to add more pink and some lilac. So I want to add some lilac here. And I want more pink in her cheeks. So I'm looking for, well, I've got several different lilacs because I have this big pack. Sometimes it's easier, just to have 12 or 24 and not have to make decisions. So I have these lilacs. Maybe I'll try the brighter one first. Yeah, I think that's quite dark. That's not really what I'm looking for. I don't think so. I'm going to use the lighter one. Now I'm going over where I've got shadow and I'm just going out a little bit from the sides of it. I mean, there's so much lilac in her eye up here. It's really nice. The lighting is just lovely on this photo. And if you do this and you decide, as mine is beginning to look very blue, if you decide it's too blue, it's not a problem, because we're going to add some more pink. But it kind of leaps out of the page at you when you get to a point where you've added so many colours. So I'm going to go for a brighter pink. So this might be the one I used earlier, I'm not sure. So I want some pink going over her nose here. So on top of the yellow, I definitely want lots of pink here. I want pink in the shadow, which is blue, but it's also pink. So I want to make sure we've got pink, and under her eye here. See, immediately this side of the face is less blue because I've just added more pink. So you just look at what you've got, and if it is too blue or too pink or too yellow, I mean, yellow, pink and blue are kind of always my main colours. And you can just add more of a different one to balance them out if they don't seem very balanced. So I'm going to put this on her lip as well, I think. And she has this lovely pink chin. So don't be afraid of colour. Just use it, because it just makes... This is why I don't draw from black and white images. Because, well, mainly they don't appeal to me, but I just love being able to layer colour up and up to get really nice, interesting effects. So now I feel like the hair needs a bit more. So I'm going to come on and do those lines again. Just trying to create something that's balanced, really. And I'm going to have a first go at doing her eyelashes. So I think I'm going to use black rather than dark brown. First of all, I'll just draw around her eyes, the top of her eyes. Not the bottom, just the top. And then it's just a flick of a pencil, really, to draw an eyelash. I might just add one or two underneath, but I don't want to add many. Just as we finish, we'll put a highlight in the eye, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm looking, trying to figure out. Her eyes look so big in this drawing, but then I look at the photo of her and her eyes are really big. She's got lots of freckles, so I'm going to add some freckles in. Freckles are hard to do with colour pencil, I think. I think they always look very drawn. So what I do once I've done them, I'll use a blender pen and rub over them to make them blend a bit more into the background. I do love her face with freckles though. She has some really light ones here over her nose, so I'm just going to draw them very lightly. It doesn't even matter to me if no one else can see them. It's that I've drawn them in and I know that they're... So once I've done them, I can just go over them. I might use the blender pen. Yeah, and it just makes the colour sink into the background a bit more. I mean, I'm probably going to use the blender pen to go over the whole face, actually. Maybe. Certainly I'm going over these shadows because I want the shadows to blend in a bit more. No, you don't have to use a pen for this. You can use a pencil. You can use that paper rubber. You could use your finger as well. But I love these pens very much. I think they work great. I might use them on her eye. Looks nice. So I'm going to come back in with a sort of orangey yellow now. I think. Trying to figure out which one to use. Maybe that one. Which I just want to use around the edges of the shadows, mainly. Because the shadows are very, not the shadows, sorry, the highlights are very yellow. But around the edge of the shadows, you often get this really nice orange colour. And I just want to bring them out a little bit more with that. The other thing that's good to do, but I always forget, is to leave a tiny highlight around the side of the face, which is bounce light usually reflected on the face. In this image, it's very sort of pinky orange. So I could add this, but it's not going to create that light color because I've got too many other layers below. But bounce light is so pretty. And it just adds to the authenticity, I think, of a portrait if you notice it and add it in. But I always always forget and have to put it in at the end, if at all. You can keep doing this kind of almost forever, just layering and layering. But obviously, if you reach a point where you're happy with how it looks, just stop. I'm not entirely happy yet, so I'm just going to keep going until I am. I think the lips need some work. And I'm not sure about this shadow on her neck. But that's not the most crucial thing. I'm just going to put a highlight in her eyes so I can see where I am with them yet, really, to see if they're finished enough. I think I do need to add some blue around the edge of her eyes. So on the white of her eye, because it's not really white. So if we add blue and possibly a little bit of red or orange. Yeah, I mean, if you look in the image, you can't see really because I've drawn lines across it. But her eyeball is more of a bluey grey colour. And then there's also a little bit of red in it. So I will always add a little bit of red. And you can put a little bit, just very lightly, just a little bit of red there. And obviously in here too. So, and while I've got the red, I'm going to come back in and work a bit more on this mouth. You can sometimes, if I'm not getting the mouth dark enough, I'll use a blender pen again to just make the colours merge a bit. But the problem when you do that is you lose a bit of the texture, and I kind of quite like the texture that the pencils make on paper. And this kind of hatching stroke makes. If I go in and blend them, I'll lose that texture, so I'm not going to do it. I am going to add a bit more red in her ears. I mean, I'm playing now, really. I'm tinkering at the edges because I'm more or less happy with how it looks. So I'm just having a look and adding bits and bobs. I might add some more red to her hair, which I know I did earlier, but we can. And it's a bit underworked compared to the rest of the face. And there's nothing wrong with parts being underworked, but I want it to balance. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with where it's going now. I still think that my shadows aren't dark enough, so I might actually come in with a bit of purple. So I'm looking here, her nose, just thinking there's no way that's dark enough. So I'm going to purple it a bit just to make it darker. And just put in some quite hard lines. So this shadow here needs to be so much darker. Yeah. The purple definitely helps. You see, you can just do very small things and it makes a big difference to how it looks. And if you go relatively slowly, you're not likely to make any disastrous mistakes. Even if you do, you just work with them. That's how you learn. It's certainly how I learn. It's my mistakes that I learn from the most. It's around her eyes as well, just to make the edges darker. I feel like there's not enough yellow in it now. But if I add more yellow, I might overdo it, but we'll try just a little bit. So this one isn't quite as bright as the one I was using earlier. This is called Naples yellow. So earlier I was using this. I think I used that one and that one. So now I'm using, this is kind of more of a creamy. And I'm going to go back to the places where we had yellow. Yeah, like that. So this is making it more yellow. Brightening up the areas that have become a bit dulled down. I've kind of lost the highlight on the end of her nose there. It's actually not drawn up. It is an empty space, but I need to darken what's around it to make it really visible. So I'm mostly using this in the spaces. So wherever it's very light. But I need to do the end of the nose. So because we can't see that highlight at all. So I'm going to come in with my lighter pink on the highlight, which helps to bring attention to it. And then just draw some of these, darken up some of these colors around it. So immediately you can see it's a highlight, which I don't think you could see before. Same here. If you do that and you don't like the highlight, you can remove it with a putty rubber. But I quite like what it does. So, and this pink on her cheeks, I'll have a little bit more. And a little bit more over here. I'm going to put some more of this pink in her neck here. So you see, I work across the whole face. I'm not going to just do one little area and then move on from that. It's just not the way I work. I tend to do it one color at a time. So I'm going to add a bit more pink here. Maybe a bit down on the neck here. and the ears, which are very, this one's very yellow, and I want it to be pinker. And I'm gonna, again, just try and re-emphasize those lines. So you can see that there's a little bit of a shadow on the tip, under the tip of her nose, which has disappeared. I think I did draw that right at the beginning, and then it's just disappeared as we've worked up. So I'm just going to add that back in, but then make the nostrils darker. I'm looking now, just trying to figure out if there's anywhere else where I need to add more. I'm not sure there is. Maybe a little bit under her mouth here, which is kind of more of an orangey color. And maybe we can go in with this orange and see what that does. It's getting a bit overworked there, actually. So I'm going to come in with my pen. And what I mean by overworked is the colors all kind of become a bit sludgy. So I work some alcohol in, leave it for a minute or two to dry, and then come back in. And then I can come back in with colors on top. It looks very smudgy at the moment, but hopefully it won't. Kind of darker than any of the other shadows, which wasn't what I intended. But this is what happens. Yeah, it looks okay, but it's a bit darker than I intended. So I'm going to take some of the pigment off. And then try again. And this is what I'm doing a lot of the time now, because I'm still fairly new to this. It's just trying to figure out how to get things to look the way I want them to look. How to add color without adding so much that you're overworking. And then if I do that, how do I get rid of it? So different ways of getting rid of it. Maybe I should have just left it as it was earlier, but I didn't. So now I have to figure ways out of working around it. I'm going to make the bottom here pinker anyway. And I'm going to make that line pinker. And then I think I'm almost finished, because otherwise I am in danger of overworking. But I wanted to come back and just, again, make the nose a bit darker. So I'm looking at my photo and I'm looking at where in the darkest areas of the photo. And obviously the eyes. What I haven't done is add a shadow over the eye. So I'm just going to do that. So the top half of the eyeball is usually in shadow. And though you can't really see it in this image, it's more the edges that are in shadow. But I'm going to add a shadow there. And then the only other thing I really want to do is come back in with the hair color. Where's my brown there? And add some down here over the face. But I'll never do that until the end, because otherwise you end up drawing over them anyway. But so we want some nice wispy hair. And that's largely, it's just using your pencil really lightly. And I'm not drawing what I see on the photograph. I'm just doing what feels right. And actually, I think the eyebrows have disappeared a bit with the drawing. So I'm not going to overwork them, but I'm just going to add that line underneath. So I am almost done. I'm just going to come in and just re-emphasize some of the lines I want to be really visible. I think I'm finished. yeah, I mean, I think if I carry on, I'm going to overwork it. So I'm going to stop where I am. So I have a photo here without, sorry, it's on my iPad. Without all the lines. I think it does look like her. And I like it anyway. I like it as a portrait in its own right, but I think it looks like her. I'll post it on Sktchy and see what she thinks. See if she thinks it looks like her. So I wanted to say something about taking photos as well, or what you do with your work once you've done it. I always post my work, so whatever I do, I will post it. But it's really hard to scan color pencil portraits. When I scan them, they come out, they look really strange. My scanner is perfect for Copic portraits, but if I scan colored pencil, then all the lines look really harsh and the color is off. So I don't usually scan them. For these, I have a daylight lamp. So if the weather's truly dreadful, I'll photograph them with a daylight lamp. But if not, I'll take them outside and just photograph them in my garden, because then you tend to get a much more accurate representation of what it is. So I wouldn't scan this. When we finished, I'll take it outside and take a picture. In the winter, then I have to rely much more just on doing it with a daylight lamp. And you have to fiddle about a bit with your phone to get the angle straight, but if you've got editing software, you can usually straighten it even if it's a bit crooked. Yeah, so scanning isn't, and I'm just, as I'm talking, I'm looking at this thinking I really want a harder hairline. I don't like the soft, but the hairline is too soft, so I'm just gonna rework it a little bit. There we are, that's all it needed. But it wasn't hard enough to start with. But yeah, I'm really pleased with that. And so I think at the moment I enjoy color pencil drawing more than anything, because I don't feel like I know that much about it. So great. Well, thank you for joining me.
Okay, will do.
Bye.
Bye-bye.